Chapter 2 of Famous Men of Modern Times. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rhonda Fetterman. Famous Men of Modern Times by John H. Harron and A. B. Poland. Chapter 2. Christopher Columbus, 1435 to 1506. One day in the autumn of 1486, a stranger knocked at the gate of a convent called La Rabida, not far from the little Spanish seaport of Palos. He held by the hand a little boy, and when the monk who opened the door asked what was wanted, he answered, "My child and I are tired and hungry. Will you give us a morsel of bread and let us have rest here a while?" They were invited to enter, and food was set before them. During the meal the stranger began to talk about the Western Ocean and what must be on the other side of it. "Most men," he said, "think that beyond the Azores there is nothing but a sea of darkness, but I believe that beyond those islands there is another and larger land." The prior of the convent and the physician of Palos, who happened to be present, were greatly interested in what their visitor had to say, and asked him to tell them his name and something of his history. "I am called Christopher Columbus," he said. "I was born in Genoa, and there my boyhood was spent. I loved when a child to watch the sailors haul up the anchor and let loose the sails when a ship began her voyage. My play was to learn the names of the ropes and find out what each was for. My father sent me to the University of Pavia, and there I learned about the stars that guide the seaman on his way. I also learned to draw maps and charts. While drawing those maps, I used to wonder whether there was not some land beyond the Canaries and the Azores. At 15 I became a sailor. I went on voyages to England and Ireland, to Greece and elsewhere. On one of my voyages our ship was wrecked on the rocky coast of Portugal, but I got to land by the help of a plank. I stayed a while in Portugal, and there I married the daughter of a sea captain who was the governor of Porto Santo, one of the Madeira Islands. I afterwards visited Porto Santo, and there I met many men whose lives were spent in sailing the sea. They told me some wonderful tales. One said that a Portuguese pilot named Martin Vincente had picked up at sea 1,200 miles west of Portugal a piece of strange wood that had been carved by the hand of man. My brother-in-law said that he had seen at Porto Santo great pieces of jointed canes, and that a friend had told him about 2 human bodies which had been washed up at Flores, very broad-faced, and not at all like Christians. All these things made me believe more firmly in the idea of a land to the westward, and at length I determined to find that land. But I was poor. I could not buy a ship nor pay a crew. I went to my native Genoa, where the masts in the harbor rise as close as the trees in a wood. I explained my plans to the rich merchants there and begged them to help me. But my countrymen were afraid to send any vessel of theirs beyond the Azores. They thought that west of those islands there was nothing but the sea of darkness. I went to Lisbon and asked the Portuguese king for help. Again I was disappointed, but I was not discouraged. I then came to Spain, and at last the good Queen Isabella heard my story. A council of learned men was called to consider my plan. They said it was wild, and advised Her Majesty to give me no aid. Thus I am again disappointed. The little money that I had is spent, and I am a beggar. It seems as if the world is against me, yet I am sure that there is land beyond the sea. The prior, the physician, and the monks who had gathered about Columbus were much interested. Father Perez, one of the monks, had been confessor to Queen Isabella, and he wrote a letter to her begging that she would see Columbus again. She consented, and Columbus went from the convent to the palace to see her. The queen again refused his request, and Columbus set out for France, hoping that the king of that country might help him. But one of the officers of Isabella's court persuaded her to change her mind, and a messenger was sent to bring Columbus back into the royal presence. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella were in camp at Santa Fe near Grenada, which they had but lately captured from the Floors, and there they signed an agreement to supply Columbus with 2 ships and to pay the crews. It was easy for the sovereigns to promise crews and to pay them, but it was very hard to find men who were willing to sail on such a voyage. Even the criminals who were promised pardon if they would go refused. To sail into the Sea of Darkness seemed certain death to them. At last, however, all difficulties were overcome. 2 wealthy gentlemen added a 3rd ship to the 2 supplied by the king and queen, and the wonderful voyage began. The Santa Maria, with a crew of 50 men, was commanded by Columbus himself. The Pinta, with 30 men, was in charge of Martin Pinzon, and the Nina, or Baby, with 24 men, was commanded by Martin's brother, Vincent Pinzon. At 8 o'clock in the morning of August 3rd, 1492, the sails were hoisted, and the little expedition left the harbor of Palos. On the 3rd day out, the Pinta lost her rudder. Fortunately, they were not far from the Canary Islands. They therefore steered for Tenerife, where they had the vessel repaired. When they had sailed about 6 weeks, they were astonished to find that the magnetic needle varied from its usual direction. Soon after observing this, they reached a part of the ocean where a great field of seaweed lay all around them. This was what is called the Sargasso Sea, and the ships of Columbus were the first that ever sailed across it. They observed another strange thing. The wind in this part of the ocean blew steadily, night and day, to the westward. It was the northeast trade wind, which was unknown to sailors along the coast and in the inland seas. They had excellent weather, but the men began to be fearful lest they could never beat back against the trade wind, and it was hard to keep them in good spirits. Happily, soon afterward, they saw some birds, and that made them sure that land was not far off. Then the Pinta fished up a fragment of sugar cane and a log of wood, and the Nina sighted a green branch covered with dog rose flowers. At 10 o'clock one night, Columbus saw a light ahead, and the next morning they landed on one of the Bahama Islands. Which island this was we are not quite sure, but it was probably the one which the natives called Guanahani. Columbus named it San Salvador. When Columbus stepped from his boat, he carried with him the royal banner of Spain. Kneeling upon the shore with his companions, he kissed the ground, gave thanks to God, and took possession of the land in the name of Ferdinand and Isabella. The expedition afterwards discovered the islands of Cuba, Haiti, and the others of the West India group. On the shore of Haiti, the Santa Maria went aground and became a wreck. With the 2 remaining vessels, Columbus soon afterwards set sail for Spain, and on the 15th of March, 1493, he dropped anchor in the port of Palos. Ferdinand and Isabella were then at Barcelona, and they received him with great honor. He showed them curious plants and gaily colored parrots, and more interesting than these, 9 natives whom he had brought from the newly discovered islands. There was now no doubt that Columbus was right, and that the Sea of Darkness beyond the Azores was only a dream. It was determined that Columbus should make another expedition. In 6 months, 17 vessels and 1,500 men were ready to sail, and the second great voyage was begun. It was on this voyage that Jamaica, Puerto Rico, and several smaller islands were discovered. Most of the 1,500 men, however, went with Columbus not in the hope of discovering new lands, but for the purpose of colonizing the island of Haiti. Columbus had learned on his first voyage that on that island there were deposits of gold, so now a mining town was founded in the gold region of Haiti, and the work of digging was begun. But the Spaniards were not fond of work. They therefore made